My name is Sylvia. I'm sitting in a lawyer's office, surrounded by my family, all eyes fixed on the lawyer as he begins to read my grandfather's will. The room is thick with anticipation, but I'm oddly calm, knowing what's about to unfold. The lawyer reads the financial will, and it's as I expected. My sister, Amelia, is handed a check for $6,900,000, and a crisp single-dollar bill is slid across the table to me. My mother, Victoria, lets out a laugh that rings through the room, and my father, Henry, says, "Go earn your own." Victoria leans in, with a smug smile, and declares, "Some kids just don't measure up." Amelia waves her check triumphantly, and my parents toast with the lawyer's mediocre coffee. I pick up the dollar, fold it, and say, "Thank you." They think they've won, but they have no idea what's coming. 4 years ago, I was a college professor in a bustling city. I taught marketing and entrepreneurship, and I was good at it. I had a comfortable life, and I thought that was my future. Then, my grandfather, Arthur, had a fall. He owned a well-known antique store in a small town, Arthur's Antiques, which had been in the family for over 50 years. It was a place where locals and tourists alike would come to find unique treasures. When I was a child, I would spend hours in that store, doing my homework on the old wooden counter while grandfather appraised antiques and chatted with customers. It was the most stable thing in my childhood, more so than my parents' often strained relationship. When grandfather got sick, it was obvious someone had to step in. My mother immediately told her friends that I was throwing away my career by going back to the town. My father, as usual, said very little. I gave notice at my college, packed my car, and drove back to the small cottage behind grandfather's house. The antique store opened at 6 a.m. every morning, just as it had for decades. Grandfather believed that an antique store was a commitment to the community, and he never let the early hours stop him from fulfilling that commitment. When I moved back, I took over the early morning shifts. I'd unlock the door, turn on the lights, and the smell of old wood and antique polish would fill the air. One morning, grandfather said to me, "You know, this place belongs to whoever opens it every morning." I thought he was just being sentimental at the time. But looking back, he was telling me something much deeper, and I was too drained from the daily routine and too used to being overlooked to fully understand. Grandfather had a chronic illness, and the doctors said he needed more and more help. My parents, who lived in another city, visited him maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Whenever they came, they never asked how he was feeling or if his medication was working. Instead, they were always concerned about the land the store was on. Henry stood at the window of the house one day, looking out at the large lot behind the store, and said, "Do you know how much this land is worth with the new shopping mall being built nearby?" Victoria picked up on it right away, saying, "Arthur, have you thought about what will happen to all this? You don't want it to be a burden on the kids." What they really meant was the money. But grandfather just replied, "I've thought about everything, Victoria. Don't you worry." And he winked at me. I didn't understand the wink then. Amelia, my sister, came around more often, but only because she always needed money. She'd show up with a sob story every few months, claiming she needed money for a new business venture or to pay off credit card debt. And every time, grandfather would write her a check. Before leaving, she'd always make a comment about the store, saying things like, "I don't know how you can stand working in this old-fashioned money pit. You gave up a real career for this." One Thanksgiving, the insults reached a new level. We were all at the house, and I'd cooked the whole meal and made sure grandfather took his medications. Amelia was bragging about a non-existent promotion at her job, and my mother was beaming with pride. Then, the conversation turned to me. "And how's the little antique store, Sylvia?" My mother asked in that patronizing tone. I said it was doing fine, steady. She let out a little pitying sound and said to the table, "You had a great career, a real profession, and you threw it away to play antique dealer in the middle of nowhere. Some kids just don't measure up to their potential. That's just life." The table went quiet for a second, and then the moment passed. Nobody came to my defense. I sat there, feeling the weight of their words, but I knew deep down that grandfather saw things differently. One winter night, grandfather was having a clear moment. We were sitting in the kitchen, him with his tea and me with my exhaustion. He said, "Sylvia, when I'm gone, they're going to come for the store. Your father will want to sell the land, and Amelia will want her share in cash. They don't see what this place really is, they only see its worth." I told him I knew. He looked at me for a long time and said, "I built this place from nothing. I always thought one of my descendants would keep it going. But it won't be your father, and it sure won't be Amelia. It's been you, opening the store at 6 a.m. every morning for the past 4 years. I've seen it." Then he asked me the question that changed everything. "If I make sure the store goes to you in a way that nobody can break it, will you keep it open?" I felt the weight of his words. I knew it wasn't a gift, it was a responsibility, a 50-year-old promise. But I looked at the man who'd been my rock and said yes. I also told him, "If we're going to do this, grandfather, we have to make sure it's airtight so nobody can say you weren't in your right mind when you decided." He laughed a little and said, "You're so thorough, Sylvia." I replied, "I learned it from watching our family circle around your land for the past few years. We hired a lawyer, Mr. Thompson, a no-nonsense real estate and estate attorney with no connection to our family. Grandfather's doctor, Dr. Miller, was also involved to certify that grandfather was of sound mind when he made the decision. 2 years before the will reading, while grandfather could still drive himself to town, Mr. Thompson structured a sale. Grandfather sold Arthur's Antiques and the land it was on to me at a fair appraised value. I couldn't pay the large sum in cash, so I signed a promissory note. I'd pay it off over the years from the store's profits and my own hard work, just like grandfather's father had passed the business down to him. The most crucial part of the deal was the medical certification. Dr. Miller examined grandfather and documented in writing that he fully understood the nature and consequences of the transaction. Mr. Thompson had it notarized and had witnesses. He built a solid wall around our agreement. When it was done, grandfather shook my hand and said, "Now they can say whatever they want. It's done and it's clean." I didn't tell anyone about the sale, not my parents, not Amelia, not even my closest friend. I knew that if I did, the battle would start while grandfather was still alive and vulnerable. My parents would pressure him to change his mind, and the stress could be too much for him. So, I kept quiet and endured their insults. I let them talk about their future inheritance at grandfather's bedside, and I just focused on taking care of him and the store. In the last few months of his life, I noticed a change in grandfather. He was becoming more forgetful, but he always remembered me and the store. One night, he gave me an old tin box that he kept in the bottom drawer of his dresser. He put it in my hands and said, "When Mr. Thompson calls everyone in to read the will, you bring this. Don't open it until then, and don't let them see it until the lawyer has done his part. Promise me you'll let the lawyer read my letter out loud, all of it, in front of everyone." I promised. I asked him what was in the box, and he just smiled and said, "Insurance. And the truth, in case anybody forgets how to recognize it." He passed away 11 days later in his own bed with me holding his hand. The last thing he said was, "Did you fix that old clock in the corner?" I told him I had, and he nodded, looking at peace. 2 days before the will reading, I opened the tin box. Inside were 3 things: a copy of the sale agreement, Dr. Miller's medical certification, and a hand-written note from grandfather. The note said, "The store stays with whoever opens it every morning." I made this change when I could still think clearly. Anyone who calls that manipulation has never made the sacrifices I've seen Sylvia make. Love, grandfather. I sat at my kitchen table, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I knew that I was about to be publicly humiliated and then vindicated. But I was ready. Back in the lawyer's office, after the initial shock of the will's financial distribution, Mr. Thompson says, "Before we conclude, Mr. Arthur left a letter, and he was very specific that I read it aloud in full to everyone present." My mother waves a hand graciously, thinking it's a sentimental goodbye. As Mr. Thompson starts to read, the room falls silent. "To my family, by now, Mr. Thompson has told you about the money, and I hope it does you good. I left it to you because I love you. But I need to explain about the store. 2 years ago, in my right mind, I sold Arthur's antiques and the land to my granddaughter, Sylvia, for a fair price. She's still paying off the note. Dr. Miller examined me that day and confirmed that I knew exactly what I was doing. The store is not part of this will because it was already hers. I gave Sylvia $1 so that nobody could ever say I forgot her. The truth is, she's the only one who's truly earned the most important thing in my life, the store. The store stays with whoever opens it every morning. Signed, Arthur." For a moment, the room is completely silent. Then, my mother jumps up from her chair, shouting, "That's impossible. He wasn't in his right mind. Sylvia manipulated him." She's trembling, pointing at me. "This is theft. This is elder abuse. Henry, we'll fight this." My father says nothing. I look at my mother and say, "He wasn't manipulated, Mom. He was paying attention." Mr. Thompson calmly lays out the documents on the table for everyone to see. He says, "This transaction was completed 2 years ago with proper medical certification. It's a closed sale, and it's not contestable." My uncle, who's been a silent witness, picks up the medical letter, reads it, and says, "Well, looks like Sylvia measured up after all." Amelia bursts into angry tears, saying, "So, I get the money, and she gets the whole business and the land. How is that fair?" Before I leave the room, I say, "I'm not taking anything that's yours. The $6,900,000 is yours, just as grandfather wanted. I'm just keeping the store that I've worked so hard for. If any of you want to come by as family, you're always welcome. But nobody here gets to call me a failure again." I pick up my bag, walk out of the office, and drive straight to the store. I unlock the door, turn on the lights, and stand behind the counter. I feel a weight lifted off my shoulders. The legacy that truly matters is finally mine. In the months that followed, my mother did consult lawyers, but both told her that the sale was airtight. The contest that my family thought would happen never did. The store remains mine, just as it was on paper for the past 2 years. Amelia took her share of the money and, as usual, spent it quickly. But one evening, she called me. She asked about grandfather at the end, and it was the first sincere thing she'd said to me in years. We talked for an hour, and though we're not close, we're honest now. My father started coming by the store every few weeks. He'd wander the aisles, and sometimes he'd pick up a broom and start sweeping. I let him because I think it's his way of saying sorry. My mother and I still don't speak much, and I've stopped expecting an apology from her. The store is still open at 6 a.m. every morning. I'm still paying off the note, but I'm not a wealthy woman in the traditional sense. I'm just the woman who keeps a 50-year-old promise alive, and that's worth everything.